most business owners, some won't admit it, but like I think most business owners want the ability for the company to operate without them. And so if you have to make gut decisions, I don't care if you're a $50 million company. If you're the one decision maker that has the perfect gut, like, can you take a week's holiday and be totally disconnected? No. Like, so to me, it's about the data side is like I trust it to an extent and I trust my gut, but like it's necessary for you to be able to disconnect and then be able to say, hey, if you guys follow this and if the decisions are made based off of this information, then like at 90% of the time you guys will make the right decision.
Hello and welcome to The Movable, a podcast dedicated to interviewing individuals involved in building manufacturing. I'm your host, Jarrett Dory. Please enjoy. Thank you for doing this, Adam.
Yeah,
Appreciate it. You want to start by just explaining what Glass Expanse is and kind of your history and getting to the point you are now, you personally?
Yeah. It I grew up in the construction industry, and so that was all I knew growing up. The glass industry, I was living in Australia and started working for a good friend over there that was in this industry. So I kind of got some knowledge, and then I sold a construction company, and this was kind of the next biggest opportunity for me, I felt like. And so that was kind of where it was born out of. It wasn't something that I grew up in. And then Glass Expanse is basically we're a one trick pony. We build a slide and stack patio door system, all aluminum and glass, and kind of does the open concept living in the residential space. Done some commercial work, but mainly in the residential construction world. We're a slide and stack patio door.
So you said aluminum. That's something, it's funny, you and I have talked a lot about kind of general business practices, management, operations, strategy, whatever, but we haven't talked about product that much, probably because our product is fairly different. But is aluminum the only option for that slide and stack?
No, so the door and window industry has kind of, I would say, three or four pillars of materials used. So there'd be steel, which is kind of coming back in. It's been outdated for a while just because of thermal properties. Aluminum is probably the nicest looking finish, but it doesn't have great thermal properties. And then we see a lot, obviously, everybody knows about vinyl windows. So those will have the lowest price point and the best thermal performance, but they kind of are chunkier look. And again, they're pretty brittle and that sort of thing. And then the fourth option would be like a fiberglass, or a lot of people are using a fiberglass mixed with something. So you get the strength and the thermal properties of fiberglass, and it has pretty good finishability. So they're kind of starting to blend that and play around. There's some companies that use a product like Fibrex. It's some wood and fiberglass composite. So that's kind of the main lines. There's other manufacturers that use other materials, but those are definitely the big ones.
Sure, sure. So the other construction business that you sold, not to dwell on that, what was that?
So flatwork concrete was what it was.
Okay.
That was in central Canada. I that was a trade that I learned from my brother, and then I spun that up and got lucky during the oil boom there. And so I went from $500 in tools in the back of my um, Jeep Cherokee, wheelbarrow, and a couple hand tools, to spinning that up to about 30 guys over 3 years. And then I brought a partner in, and he was definitely more boots on the ground, less business focused. And so he kind of took the management side of it. And then when I moved to the US, I sold my portion to him. So,
Okay. Okay. Um, that's interesting. Something that uh, I was on the Glass Expanse website, and I'm always like really impressed with how you guys display yourselves, and I mean, to me, Glass Expanse is a big business. Um, Maybe not in the scope of like some of enterprises in America, but like to me, it's a big business with, lots of employees. But it's like you've done that before. 30 guys, or I say people in that flatwork concrete, that also is a lot of people. So it's not your first time, I guess, biting off a more sizable enterprise.
Yeah, the service-based, like a service-based company with more than 5 to 8 guys is a big headache because there's so many unreliable parts of the construction um, aspect of it. Like you're relying on other people to do things before you, and so you can show up and something's not ready. And so there's a lot of coordinating people to be in certain places. And flat work concrete, you're pouring 4 or 5 driveways a day with that many guys. And so there's different addresses. You're shuffling guys around. If something's not ready, you're trying to scramble. Whereas what we do now is a manufacturing, it's like, hey, as long as our sales team is selling, we're basically following the same process in a controlled environment. So it it to be honest, the service side business, any construction business I've ever been in, has always felt like you're disorganized. There's no way to gain efficiency. Whereas in a manufacturing business in a controlled environment, there's, I mean, like, there's a ton of ways to automate things, to squeeze efficiency out, less people, more work. And so that's something that is new to me. In the construction business, it was just like, hey, just react and just try and, get as much done as possible. And that's working longer days. Controlled environment, you have a standard working schedule, what's happening next week, what's coming down the pipe. So very different business. I feel it feels like a bigger business, but as far as like uh, coordinating people and management, it seems way easier, if that makes sense.
Right, right. Yeah, always, I think there is kind of, I just read an article about um, like why, like there's been some startups trying to kind of revolutionize home building. Like, I mean, that's kind of like the big,
Yeah.
obviously it's a big industry, by doing, manufacture more of a manufactured system that then goes to site. And that it was about why it's kind of failed for some of these startups. They've tried to do it on a very large scale. And, it seemed like the article, the driving point was that Silicon Valley people don't know enough about construction to revolutionize it. So they maybe made a mistake in not having enough technical expertise. But there's definitely a huge advantage to, I know exactly what you're talking about. My background being farming and then being in manufacturing, it feels way more, although we operated for a long time, it wasn't until recently that we maybe are more coordinated and more methodical. And I don't know, maybe with you saying that, do you think part of it is that when you're in a business where you're like, I'm selling a product, I have to develop the product, I got to build the product, I have to sell it, that you bring on a more well-rounded team too? Like, could that be part of the reason? Like maybe construction, if people were more well-rounded in their businesses, that it would be less crazy. I mean, you still have the environment, but
I think it's a lot of things. It's hard to put your finger on one thing. I think the big ones that stand out to me are, yes, you can attract a different level of talent, but it's their understanding of how the business operates, like a standard operating system of a business. So you kind of get people that are used to working in a process, whereas most people in the construction field, and that, like, I grew up there, is like you just put in the hard work. And so that's
mm,
not about following a process or making efficiency. You're just like grinding every single day. And so
right.
naturally, the team that you're going to build on most construction companies are going to be more like, I can work hard. And those guys work super crazy.
Super
Like
hard.
they'll work their face off for 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. Those guys are tough, but it's a different way of thinking in the people that you attract
Right.
to a manufacturing company, in like, hey, I worked in these other companies. I understand the process, the value of that, and having repetition and
Mm,
standard operating procedures and that sort of thing. So I think the type of people that are attracted to this type of business are just geared a little bit different, different experience. So that's the big one for me. And again, I think as far as the modular construction, these companies that are trying to do modular offsite construction, I think what I've seen is that there's a lot of baby boomers still in the construction industry, and really those are the main players, the thought leaders, the guys that have all the experience. And this new technology, I think it could be good, but they aren't adopting it. So I think as you see that generation churn out of the construction industry, I think the younger
oh
generation
yeah.
might accept it more. So they might just be early. Um, but also, like a lot of people don't understand that when you're pouring a foundation in the field, like weather, shifting soils, like all these things, variables, you just never get a perfect product. And so trying to put a perfect building on an imperfect foundation is like, fraught with details or
Right.
issues. So, um, yeah, I think it'll happen. I think it has to happen because the workforce is just shrinking. And so that or the
Right.
housing cost is just going to skyrocket. But yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out for sure.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like your experience is similar to mine. Like I really resonate with what you said of going from kind of this reactionary state to like a much more planned and systemized state. So it's interesting. It's probably why like a lot of people are drawn to maybe manufacturing either on accident. Like for me, it was on accident, but my personality definitely like I like to systemize and do these different things. So that's interesting that it could be also a generation attracted to it too. Like we've seen, that that's kind of maybe not ideal.
I think depending on who's guiding the company too. Like I know you are very much a systems and organization and structured kind of guy. And I've surrounded myself with a team that is like that. And so even though I personally am not super that way, but what I've noticed is that anytime I talk to a company in our industry that's a similar revenue size, most of them have the owner and their son selling, and then they have their uncle and somebody else in the shop, and it's very reactionary still. So their mindset around the business is still very small. Whereas you and I think, understand that the scale could be bigger, but you have to lay that foundation of systems and organization and process. And so
Right.
I don't know if you've had the same reaction, but when people talk to you about your business, and your business is kind of, it's always like, I love hearing about it because from the outside, people can be like, oh, so you like cut pipe and weld it, and then you build this thing that like horses live in, and like who cares about the fit? Like they'll knock it down, right? But like when I talk to you, it's like we've got the system, we've got this process, we've got people in specific seats. There's a very systematized way that you're going about it. And I don't know if you have the same reaction, but I'm sure that when you talk to bigger business people, they're probably surprised at the foundation and the level of organization that you have in your company at your size. They're probably like, oh, you're ahead. You know,
Right.
usually businesses don't do that until X revenue amount. And so do you have that
Yeah.
reaction from people?
Yeah. Actually, the best example of that reaction is our sales and marketing manager. When we hired her, um, she said, and this was just how we were portraying ourselves, but I think it ties in. She's like, "Oh, I thought the business was way bigger than what it is." It's like, yeah, there's just a few of us, in admin positions. And so I think, and from that day that she came on, we've recruited another individual, happens to be her sister, that like they've absolutely systemized it to the point like you talk about me being systemized. The way I operate is systemized, but I didn't have the tools because I've never really worked in a business much bigger than one or two people. I have, but not for long enough to really see how the entire management process is. And so I had developed a lot of really bad habits when dealing with other people. Like when I was doing my own work, I'd get, I'm very systemized, getting things done, but then I like delegate and I wouldn't have enough of a system for the person's capacity to do it. And so it ended up being kind of chaotic. And now we have like a bunch of robots. We're all like, and I know this isn't necessarily the best thing, but those ladies called me out on some of my behavior that was just causing chaos. So I am systemized, but I can also cause kind of extreme chaos because I like new ideas and trying new things. And you can only do so much trying new things in a day, right? So
Yeah.
anyway, but I think I know what you're saying as far as like people being impressed with like, oh, you have all that. I mean, still, this year is the first year that I'm like kind of proud of like, yeah, we like, there's a place for everything, you know, and a person in a place. But anyway,
Yeah, I think that in the scope of companies in our industry, at least, there's these kind of levels that people hit, and to me, there's the monsters that do $2 billion a year each. Then there's the guys that are in the hundreds of millions, and then there's kind of like the tens of millions, and there's kind of these levels, and you
mm-hmm.
kind of see. You'll talk to people that are in the huge organizations, like these billions of dollars per year, and they're they're talking about the same issues that we're having, that we're solving with systems. And so
Yeah,
it's like maybe they're not as far ahead as you think. Like maybe they're not that advanced. They're not all using AI and a bunch of robots and like automation. It's like there's
yeah,
still guys on the floor and they're still like cutting themselves, and there's
right,
the same
yeah.
issues. And so uh, I think addressing those early on and building that foundation of systems around it, I think will allow you to scale if there's market there.
It's kind of interesting you say that. We just, our shop foreman and myself and one other guy went and toured our neighbor's facility, Sun Steel. It was formerly Can-Am. They build hospitals, stadiums. They build structural steel packages that are installed on site by like a metal erector. So they're the fabrication component. They bid these huge jobs. And so we called up the GM, like, can we get a tour? And super nice guy. And so we go and tour this facility. There's 180 people working in the shops. And just like, I almost like burst out laughing at one point because our shop crew is 9. That's our assembly crew. And I can't remember his name now, but I brought up like, hey, we've got like some issues in our shop where like all the guys that come in and that we train, they want to become welders because that's like maybe we end up paying them more. It's kind of the glory job compared to the carpenters or the finishers, we call them, because it's not super high skilled carpentry. The CNC is kind of its own animal. You have to have a very specific personality. But I was like, we kind of have like, I feel like where we're always pushing people into a position because of either pay or how it's perceived. And he's like, oh, that's hilarious. We have the same problem. We have our fitters and our welders, and the fitters always got paid more because they could read plans and whatever. But he's like, if you do a bad weld, it slows the shop down. But we had this issue where we paid the fitters more, and all the welders were trying to be fitters. So we'd lose all our good welders to try to be fitters, and it was just like always upside down. And I was like, oh, you've had the same problem. You have 180 people, and like the scale is so much different. And so, and a lot of the same things we were discovering, like if he's like, yeah, if a package looks bad and like the owner's wife sees like footprints on it, she'll be like ticked about it. And I'm like, that's hilarious. It's got nothing to do with the quality of the product or anything, but we'll have the same thing. We'll ship a product. And if the guys aren't like on it about like, yeah, no footprints on the lumber, nothing that's going to wreck anything, like totally fine, people will pick up on it. And so it's like, you do deal with, even on different scales, a lot of the similarities. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think that the when you're trying to put a product into the premium or uh, above average product category, I think you're always going to deal with people that are just like a little bit more. They notice the smaller details, and so
Mm-hmm.
that's just something we've chosen to take on. But
Yeah. So what's your day to day in Glass Expanse? Where have you, your staff is big enough where you kind of have management, you have a CEO. I was looking on their site. What, how did it start? I mean, at some point when you start a business, you're kind of doing a bit of everything, and then you kind of get into hopefully where the thing you're best at, and you let other people take over weaknesses. Can you talk about that a little bit? How that path has been for you from start till now?
yeah, it's I think my goal when I started this company, I wrote a business plan, took it to the bank, and was like, hey, my big hairy audacious goal is to hit $2 million in revenue a year. Like that was the the peak of the mountain for me. And
Hmm.
so it was always in my brain was, you'd have 10 to 15 guys and you'd have the ability to step like more of a lifestyle business. I wouldn't be super involved. And that was kind of the goal. And I've never visualized myself as like a CEO type. I'm more of like a visionary kind of product guy. I like designing product and R&D. So it started obviously, like you said, where it's like me by myself. I have a CNC machine, I have inventory, and I go out and try and sell a couple doors, and then I come in and build them. And I was building them by myself. And like I often show pictures to our at our Christmas party every year of like me lifting an A-frame of glass up with a forklift and then dropping a panel onto the table by myself and then picking them up and loading them. And like my brother would fly down from Canada for a week if I had a big install and give me a hand for free labor. Like he, so you're just doing what you can, right? And then we kind of got up to about 6 guys, and that was just before COVID. And when COVID hit, we basically laid everybody off, and we're like, I guess we're dead. And then about a month later, the orders started coming in, and we hired, brought all those guys back, like, come on back. And then went from 6 to like 30 people in a 6 month span. And so,
Wow.
because it was just that renovation boom during COVID,
Yeah.
we had some videos go viral and get a ton of awareness. And so we just grew like crazy during that period. And then, so again, my experience is like kind of small business hands on. And then in that phase, it was just like I was hiring anybody that would show up for an interview. It was like, you seem nice, cool, jump in. And like, I don't know what you're going to do, but like, just come on board. We need people. And then at about 30 people, the wheels started to fall off. It was just like, hey, again, you can get to a certain size, but it's like, hey, there's no organization. Like, I don't know who's reporting to who's
Hmm.
responsible for what. And so at the end of 2020, we brought in a buddy of mine that worked at a bank, and he kind of sat in that CEO seat and said, temporarily, I'll come in and help structure. And we hired a COO at the same time. So the three of us kind of said, what's the foundation? Let's reconfigure this so we can actually build off it. And so we went through about a year. So 2021 was kind of the year of, hey, let's lay some foundation. We got an ERP system. And then out of 2022, we started to say, okay, we've got a really good foundation. We've got good org structure. We're ready to go. And then at the Q3 of 2023 is when I brought this CEO back on. So he came in temporarily, then he left, went back to the bank, and then now he's come back as a permanent CEO. And
Oh,
so
okay.
um, all basically most of the day to day work currently he runs. I help out with sales. I help out with marketing, content. I I'm on the road and visiting with our high end or like volume customers, our repeat builders, um, and then a lot of R&D. So that's what I love to do and what I feel like I'm good at. And so now the business has structure, the right team, and the day to day is covered by somebody else. Essentially, now the day to day is handled by him. I'm out trying to get bigger contracts and then develop additional product lines, essentially. So either add-ons to our current system or other product lines that we can sell in parallel with this. So like fixed windows, that sort of thing, that we're not currently selling.
Sure. Okay. And a lot of that R&D would be collaborating probably with customers, I assume.
Yeah, a lot of it is a feedback loop from sales. So the way that we think about it is like, what else are customers asking for? Let's go build that because our current
Right.
customers that are buying a door system are like, hey, I need four windows, I need a house package, I need this, and so fixed windows is a big one. Hey, I want the windows to match these doors, and so we have other third parties that sell similar products, but we'll develop our own line, and then. Uh, there's some fun stuff. Again, I'm kind of like I like building unique products, so I'm going to do some fun, crazy stuff that's going to be kind of if it works, it'll be a totally new product to the market. But that's the fun stuff for me. And then I have a third party engineering firm that does all of our, the engineering side, the CAD drawings, the testing, prototyping, all of that stuff is done by a third party.
Sure. So, the growth component and hiring, I've thought about like, I've talked about my wife with this, like, even for myself, there's some things that I did that I'm like, oh, I wouldn't do that again. But at the time, just didn't know better or whatever. Do you feel like there's some advantage that you maybe have, like you went through that huge growth spurt and kind of had to recalibrate? Like I've been saying, like ignorance is a good thing sometimes, like when you don't, or like a or like a really high pain tolerance, like you're just like, oh, this is happening, and then when you look back, you're like, oh, that was brutal. Like, do you feel like you have that, or do you have like, do you feel like there's some sort of psychological makeup, or some way that you are that you're like, oh, that wasn't a big deal? Or because some people would just be like, I would never ever choose that. Is that kind of like how you are, or a way of thinking, or
Yeah, I've put myself in the bucket of optimist for sure. Like I definitely carry out my life with optimism and everything. Like I trust everybody 100% out the gate, and it's like if you burn me, okay, that's on you. But like I give everybody the benefit of that. Like I've always carried through my life, and I get burned, right? Like I get used, abused, whatever. But there's a speed to that I've always enjoyed of like, hey, I'm gonna throw myself into relationships, into situations, and I'm going to figure out really fast if this is a good fit or not. That's, I guess, my mentality. So I,
that's
I,
interesting. Sorry. Yeah, interesting. Interesting. Go ahead. Sorry.
so, so I think when I started this company, there was never a thought in my brain of like, oh, if things get too tough, I'll just shut it down. Like, oh, it didn't work. Like, failure wasn't an option in my brain. And so to me, it wasn't this toughness thing. It wasn't this like, I'm so resilient. It was just like, there is no option B for me. Like, and that was a lot of that is childhood wiring from my father and like his work
Right.
ethic and stuff. But like, to me, it was just like, if you don't have that option, then you're just going to figure it out. And then a layer below that would be, I just, I love problem solving. Like that is, I was the kid that had crossword puzzles, that had books and books of, uh, puzzles and trying to figure stuff out. Like I love that type of stuff. So to me, when I'm hit in the face with something, like the instant pain is like, this sucks. But then it's like my brain just automatically goes into, okay, like what are my options? Like how do I work through this? And so it's, we've been hit with some huge stuff, like things that I think would break most sane people. But I just
Hmm.
have this like, and again, it's not a toughness. It's not a, I've trained my mind or anything like that. Like
Right.
I look at these people that talk about it on social and I'm like, okay, like there's a, I think some people are just hardwired with it. And to me, it's like, this is my thing. I enjoy it. And like, this business could go under, it could go away, but like, it's not going to be because I've thrown up my hands and been like, I was
Hmm.
dealt a bad card. So, um, yeah, I feel like I'm pretty resilient, just by nature. And then the team I have around me, the team that we have in place and we've kind of had through the years is very much, they'll collect the data. So I kind of just am in the moment, but they are very good at documenting things. So like when we brought on HR director way early for a company our size to have a director of HR, but she knows the law to a T. She documents everything. So when we're faced with, oh, this person did XYZ, she's like, let me pull up my paperwork. Oh, this is what we did last time. Let's stay consistent. Raises, hiring, firing, whatever. It's like everything's fair. The process is followed. So I have this support group and these people around me that are very consistent in nature. And so that's, I think, been the biggest difference for me.
Yeah. That's interesting. You said the speed thing. I wholeheartedly agree with that. Like, uh, I just like, well, my wife was always like, "You're going to hire someone?" Yeah. And like I didn't think it was a big deal, but like you learn so much, right? You learn about how dealing with people and whatever. But I think I like don't recognize the pain at the time.
Yep.
It's when I look back, I was like, "Oh, that wasn't super fun." But the one thing for me that I've had to figure out was I have a gear. Like you talked about like no options. That's 100% me. Like my wife's like, what if this doesn't work? I'll just do something else. It's not even like to me, taking a job is just as much risk as starting a business.
Yep.
In kind of a brain dead way, probably to think because new businesses fail and, old businesses don't tend to fail as fast, or don't. But that's kind of who I am. But something that I've had to learn in the last few years, because my health kind of deteriorated in our business, just like in some facets.
Yep.
But I didn't realize, like, I had one gear and that was just like doing it all the time. And I never worried, not a worrier, but I get so amped. It was like a stress on my body that it was not good. And I've had to really like, that has been the downside for me kind of being that way. So I'm curious, you don't strike me that way, but maybe you do, like where I don't know, I describe my entire body's just extremely intense the entire day. I'm getting a lot done, but it's like not good. So I'm feeling like you have a lot of we have a lot of similarities, but maybe in that's maybe not a it's not a good thing, but maybe you don't have that. Like you can shed the day pretty easy and you don't
Yeah.
get,
I don't know if it's a laziness and not being prepared. Like, so I will fall asleep. My head hits the pillow. I'm out. Like, don't stress. So don't lose sleep.
mhm.
But there's a lot of mornings that I wake up and I'm like, man, I wish I would have just sat for a little bit last night and prepared for this day. So I am definitely less prepared than I could be, but I don't carry the stress of like, I'm preparing for tomorrow and then I'm stressing about stuff through the night. Like I work
Yeah.
hard, I rest hard. And so, um, I think I've been able to start to recognize when people talk in the way that like you and I are kind of trying to describe. And so, have you ever heard of Jesse Itzler? I think his last name is. He built.
Maybe. Is he the guy
He
that hung
built
out
like
with
a
David Goggins or something?
yes,
Yeah.
and he built like a private jet company. Anyways, I saw him talking the other day, and he was like, "Yeah, like I was like a teenager. I had no aviation experience. I didn't know anything." And people were like, "Don't you need like FAA approval?" And he's like, "I don't know what that is, but like I'll figure it out." And he built this massive like aviation company, and it like when he was talking about it, you can see that he was just like, I don't know. I'm just going to jump in. I'm excited about this. I'm going to throw everything in, and I don't know everything, but no one does. And so let me just like work through it and figure it out and like, break it up into bite-sized chunks. And so I look at people like that and I'm like, aviation seems like a heavily regulated industry, a lot of
Hmm.
like, risk. And I'm like, I'm building a door. Like to me is like that. I've picked a pretty low bar. And so to me is like, if someone like that can jump into an industry like that and have success in that mindset, like why couldn't I in this industry?
Right.
And so um, I see it in you as well, where it's like, hey, I didn't grow up in a fabrication family, and I don't know how to draw 3D CAD and like lay out plans perfectly and stuff. But like, let's just start and let's build this thing in a barn with dirt floors, right? Like you told me, I think in the beginning, it was like we just have dirt floors, like not great equipment, like everybody's just putting stuff together, and it's like you figure it out. And so I'm starting to see that in different people, and it's like it's not necessarily this like hoorah, like rah resilience that I've like worked programmed my brain. It's like just some people are wired that way. There's pros and cons in being that way.
For sure. For sure. I think um you have to like we kind of joke about like being like a little bit weird or like even amongst our staff, like you got to be like a little bit strange to not, to like certain things like a business that is just starting. But I think for me is like the one thing that I wished that I don't wish is different because it's allowed me to accomplish a lot. But like I said, it's deteriorated my health. Is just like I'm probably a little OCD. Like if all the lights aren't turned off in the house, I have to go and turn them all off type of thing. And so
Yeah,
I sleep well at night, but I think the detriment to my health is I cannot let one thing undone.
yeah.
And so I've
I'm
started to
definitely more
give myself
carefree.
some tools. More
Yeah, like
carefree, yeah.
yeah, and again, I think if I look back over my life, I'm like, there's a trade-off. I think I could be farther ahead. If I was more disciplined, I think I could have gotten started earlier. I think I would have not had some of the losses I had. And I could
Sure.
be farther along. But I look at the experiences I've had and like the setbacks, and like I traveled for like I backpacked around the world for 5 years. Like that was a very carefree experience, not very
Right.
proactive. But like out of that came so many valuable things that I would not take that back ever. So I think for me, the carefree approach has worked, but the way that I've found success in it is by having those not as carefree OCD type people around.
Yeah, fair
And
enough.
you got to be conscious that like there can be a lot of stress in the business, and as a carefree person you can be like, we're good, and they're carrying all that stressful load. So I think
Sure.
you carry a lot more load for your people than I do. I kind of am like, hey, we'll figure it out, and they're like, I'm losing sleep. And so
Right, right. I don't know. I'm weird because sometimes I'll just be like, "Oh, you're going to do this? Here's everything. You are not equipped for this at all." But yeah, no, I definitely can see the pros and cons to each one.
and one
So,
one thing you mentioned, I want to go back for one sec because you mentioned like, hey, I feel like we talk amongst ourselves as like we're weird, or like we're a bunch of weirdos, whatever, because we're like into this type of business or startup. I think I think if you look at all humans, we're all nerds about something, and a lot of people don't have that thing. So they'll be like, "Oh, I like video games, or I like reading, or whatever, Sudoku, whatever." But I think what I'm understanding is if you can give them enough responsibility for them to start to become a nerd about your thing, then there's this switch of buy-in where they're just like, now I'm starting to nerd out, and you kind of see this compounding effect where the people like we hire nerds for sure. I'm a nerd, but like you see them focus on their day-to-day work, the business, and they start to like nerd out over this stuff, and that's where you get the unlock of like, hey, these guys are thinking about the business, their ownership mentality, they're like they're enjoying what they're doing. So that's, yeah, I think it's good to have a group of
Yeah,
weirdos.
oh, I know exactly what you're saying. 100. I couldn't agree more because when we got the quote unquote weirdos that, the three of us joke about, it it the business has improved. Like we're working less, we're doing better at what we're doing. So I couldn't agree more. Like when you really take just a genuine interest in improvement of the business, it's amazing.
Yeah.
So there's two things that I'd like to ask you about. The one is I saw a picture of your guys' actual like facility in which you assemble the product. or manufacture the product. Can you talk about anything that you've done that's made massive changes, equipment, systems, anything you'd like to share about that? I love that sort of thing. It's a little bit hard in this
Yeah.
situation because I'd like to be in the shop looking at it. But is there anything you can share that just stands out as like that was a, doubled production, or like we went from custom orders going there and, you know, typical inventory being built there or something like that?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. So our process, we have one product line, and we've always kind of had one product line that you can use in different um, uh, applications, but it's really the same system that's built, whether it's a window size or a door size. Um, so when we started, and I'm sure you guys did the same thing, you will be anything to anyone who wants to buy a product from you. So you're just like,
Mm-hmm.
you want it in bright pink? Yes, we can do that. We'll figure it out. You want this crazy feature, one-off feature? Yes, we'll build it for you. And so you highly customize to try and get business. And then what I think a lot of businesses do is they say, okay, now I have to have a product line for that customization, da da da, right? And so then all of a sudden they have 150 SKUs of each product line because in the past a customer has asked for that. So they're like, well, must be important. So what we did is in 22 was we looked at where are the numbers, what's the 80/20, right? Like, and in our case, it was way more. So we had things like, well, we have a key lock option. We have in swing or out swing option. We have all these things, right? Different configurations, different colors. We'll do any custom color that you want it powder coated. And then we started looking and it was like, oh, 1% of our projects are powder coated. And on those, we have this many callbacks and we lose money and whatever, whatever. So then we started weeding things out. So the biggest thing for us was condensing our offering down to like, we offer one color and you get a choice of out left or out right. Like that's the configuration options. We've started to layer some like zero post corner stuff back in, but like it's very limited offering. And so, yes, we've cut out some sales, but our internal process is like 2x. So what happened is when we went through that, we had enough personnel on the floor to do the work that was needed with all that customization. And so out the back end, what happened is all of a sudden we were overstaffed. And so
Mm.
we went through this kind of time where we're like, our payroll's high, our sales, we've kind of chopped sales. And so the decision was made that, hey, we're going to hold on to these people and we're going to really reallocate everything we can to sales and get that back up to where they're not operating at 50% efficiency. And so that's what we've done. And we retained those people for almost a year and they were at about 50% efficiency. But a lot of those people are super loyal to us now and like are incredible people. But that was the biggest unlock for us was like, oh, if you kind of condense your offering, all of a sudden you have the ability to like, yeah, like you don't have to think about what part you're picking, what color. You don't have these runs up to the powder coater and back. You don't have like, oh, I forgot to add that special order onto the order form on the sales side. So that was a big unlock for us. Now, our process is pretty the same as yours probably. It's just like you just need space and workstations and you can kind of pump through a certain amount in a certain square footage. And then past that, it's going to be kind of like, hey, I need more space for tables and storage, pallet racks and hardware. And so we feel like we've kind of got to a point where, hey, what we're doing right now is a good use of efficiency for our floor space. That being said, we are in about 12,000 square feet now, and we're building a new building this year. We bought some property, and that'll be about 25,000 square feet. So that'll give us confidence to really push on the sales. And then we have our production director is very thoughtful about for looking forward and saying, hey, if sales pops off, what are my levers that I can pull? So he's like, I can go to a vertical gluing instead of a horizontal gluing cycle, and that takes up the most floor space. And so I can get another 30% just by making that change. And then I have this over here and this over here. So he's very proactive in looking at those things. But I would say reducing your product line offerings and really concentrating on what we're good at. And then the internal process and the efficiency of the people on the floor are just like, you probably get 50% out of it just doing that because they don't have to think about, am I grabbing
Yeah.
this part or, what am I looking for? So,
Yeah, I think I think in 22 we did the same thing.
yeah,
It's like
yeah,
kind of weird, right? Because you're like, yeah, you've spent all this time trying to get sales, and then you're like, we're going to get rid of sales because it's going
yeah,
to optimize our administrative systems and our production systems. And it's like, for me, it was a little bit difficult. We you go through that kind of emotional cycle, I think, as an owner all the time. The first one we went through was we had to double our prices literally and like kind of change how we offered our product. And I was just like,
yeah,
man, no one's going to buy it. And more people bought it because we included shipping and like, but then we had to go through
yeah,
that same thing. It's like, we're going to cut out. And this is part of having really good people that are data driven. It's like, yeah, that's going to give, we're going to cut out X amount in sales by getting rid of those products. Shop efficiency is going to increase. And if we do have downtime, like right now is usually like we see our slowest sales in January. If the shop gets slow, we have 3 R&D projects that we can build and mess around with that are going
yeah,
to, you know, double sales potentially. And so it's like
yeah.
when you get that grander view of it all, it's like, okay, this isn't so hard to cut sales. But I think in 22, we did the exact same thing. So that's funny that you guys were going through that. I
And
mean,
I,
COVID had a very much an effect on everyone.
yeah, and I think you have to understand the market. Like in the beginning, I didn't understand the scope of the market. And so it's like we thought, that we would have to do every custom job just to get to a certain level because we didn't understand the market. And then you start doing market research and you're like, oh, this is way bigger. Like all I need is a 0.5% of this market, and I'm actually 10x what I thought I would be. So sometimes I see people going, I'm going to limit my product offering, and then they squeeze their market too much and they can't grow. But I think you and I understand that, like, hey, our markets are huge and like we're barely scratching the surface. And so limiting our product offering might limit the market a little bit, but like we still have so much room to
Yeah.
grow. So,
It's fascinating with data like that. Like, I think companies now can get a little too data driven where they lose track of like their leadership is just looking at data and they're not like in tune with what's actually happening because
yeah,
sometimes data lies, right? But something
yeah,
for a business of our size, like my first like data analysis, it's really nothing. But I just was like, okay, in the Pacific Northwest where we're operating, how many people are there? So I'm like, oh, there's like 10 million or whatever people. And then like, how many of those people have interest in livestock? Say 2%. Of that 2%, could how many people would be interested in our product? It's like, oh, like another 2% of that 2%. And then how many people can you convert from that? And it was still like, you're still looking at really high sales volumes. And you're like,
yeah,
oh, this market is bigger. Like you always feel like you've done so much to reach the market. It's like, dude, Craigslist is not the only advertising tool or whatever you're doing. Um, but it is interesting now. Like I'm so excited about our future because we did our first like really, really great budget and sales forecast. And it's like one of the things that I was just like, this is so amazing. It's like, yeah, for marketing, whatever, you've got like a marketing budget. That's obviously huge because marketing can drive sales. But like one of the things our foreman now has how many shop hours it took to produce X amount of units in each quarter and how much we're projecting for. And so it's like, you might need to be thinking about hiring because in this quarter we're projecting, and we know that like projections can be very off,
yeah.
but you feel so much better about even knowing how many people you need and what, it's like, what's the realistic amount? And so that whole like understanding your data, like you were talking about, like how much are these extra little sales that are just pains? How much are they really affecting? And then like, how much are like the cost, what's actually the cost of doing them? Because it could be taken from something else. So I
Yeah. And
find
I think a
data to
lot of
get really
people,
exciting.
I think a lot of people overcomplicate data as well. Like I think a lot of people in small businesses are like, oh, like that's a big business thing. And I'm like, just build an Excel spreadsheet. Like it doesn't have to be fancy. Like
Hmm.
pull some raw data. Like I still up until the end of this of 23 would go into our sales pipeline and pull raw data and plug it manually into a spreadsheet that I was keeping separately for a projection to compare against a different projection. And it's like, it took me 3 minutes a week and I would just do it. And I kept it for 2 years. And then I started to map it out. And it was like, I'm not an Excel wizard by any means. It's all self taught. And so it's like, but it's like, it's something so that instead of just making pure gut calls, you're like, hey, I think I can see something here. And so it's not that complicated. Like I think a lot of people get nervous about like, oh, I don't want to like spend a bunch of time. It's like it doesn't take that much time. Just put
Right.
data into a spreadsheet and then start looking at it. And over a long enough time, trends are going to start to pop out. And so just
I
consistency.
think probably your personality talking about like that OCD thing. I made a mistake in data, exactly what you're saying, way overcomplicating it, like making it super complicated. And when we brought people on that had been in businesses before and, a really great accounting firm that, or like does our accounting and our bookkeeping, it's like, I remember I had a meeting earlier in 23 with our accountant and she's like, yeah, okay. I'm like, okay, we're going to do a budget. I'll do it. And I'm like, I'm kind of freaking out about like this and that. And she's like, oh, don't do that. That's way, you're like, and in the margin of error of like doing it the simple way of just like say cost of goods all in
Yeah.
one bucket is like compared to like going through the MRP and like it's like 2% probably. So it's like
Right.
just go with the generalized number, and that's been super helpful is having that frame of mind that make it super simple, some very basic numbers, and it gets exciting then because you can check your gut. Like you're saying, you're going off your gut and you
Yeah.
can check your gut and you're probably for the most part like somewhat in tune. But I think going back to your comment, like people saying, oh wow, you're really advanced for like the size of your business or whatever. I know like there's businesses that have been around for 50 years and it's just pure chaos. There's
Yeah.
no data driven decisions. There's no like, it's just like we're not show. Well, I mean, you hear it all the time. The contractor hasn't showed up. He said 2 months ago he's going to show up. It's like, what is happening? And actually, that's
Yeah.
been a huge advantage for us, on time, on budget. Like you can start seeing where the advantages start to play in when you do get that level of organization. It's much easier to acquire customers when they're not getting yanked around.
Yeah. And I think, most business owners, some won't admit it, but like I think most business owners want the ability for for the company to operate without them. And so if you have to make gut decisions, I don't care if you're a $50 million company, if you're the one decision maker that has the perfect gut, like can you take a week's holiday and be totally disconnected? No. Like so to me it's about the data side is like I trust it to an extent and I trust my gut, but like it's necessary for you to be able to disconnect and then be able to say, hey, if you guys follow this and if the decisions are made based off of this information, then like 90% of the time you guys will make the right decision. And so that to me is a big part of the strategy for me being able to step out of the business and it operate and grow without me.
Sure. So one question, I had the question about like production and like what's been a big effect there. The other question was as far as sales go, Glass Expanse is selling either directly to the homeowner or to a contractor that is building the home or renovating the home.
Yeah.
Is that like you're targeting directly your customer for the most part? Like they're the ones telling their builder like, "Hey, I want Glass Expanse in my home," or what's kind
Yeah.
of, can you talk a little bit about your how you market to your customer?
Yeah. So Um, I've talked about this a lot. In the construction industry, everything has always been architecturally driven. So for the last 30 years, an architect, especially in the premium market, right? We're dealing, let's say, $700,000 homes plus. So you're going to have an architect and a designer involved. The architect will spec pretty much everything, the architect or designer. And historically, the builder has taken the plans and built what the architect said. And so there's some customer interaction on the front end with the architect, but a lot of customers just didn't have a knowledge of what products were available, what was good, what wasn't. So the architect was the one that was driving the spec. And then through my construction industry experience, I've seen that shift more to the builder where the architect specs something, but it's usually this product or similar. And so the builder has more flexibility around like, hey, I've worked with this local company or these guys have been good to me. So they spec a folding door system. I'm going to use this brand because I know the guy, the sales rep, whatever, right? So you'd start to see the product choice shift to the builder. And then in the last like 10 years, I feel like it's starting to switch even more to the homeowner. So everybody with Pinterest and the YouTube and everything, people are becoming more educated about what's available, what products are out there, the technical side. Like people are learning, and HGTV has educated people. Like there's just so much information out there. And so now what you see is someone will walk into the architect and say, here's the style of home I want. I want this countertop. I want that, like the features in their home, they're driving the spec. And so our product is a feature in a home. It's not a toilet, right? So to me, it's something that inspires people and people get emotional about. And so to me, I'm like, the fastest way to guarantee spec in a project to me is go to the decision maker who's the homeowner. And I think it's shifting more. So we'll see pockets like in Texas. San Antonio is very builder driven. Builders are the experts. You do what the builder says. Then Austin, an hour and a half north, is 100% architect driven. The builders are like scared. Like if I don't do what the architect tells me, I'm in trouble. And it's like you see these different pockets. And so, but you see this shift towards, hey, later, like lower down is actually the ultimate decision maker. So when we started, I was like, hey, I think this is going to be a trend that moves in this direction. I think people are going to want to build smaller, more customized homes. I don't think our generation wants the 8 bedrooms, all of that, right? We want more smaller, more custom homes. And so my, again, gut decision was, hey, let's try and educate and inspire home owners, like the people that are actually responsible. So that was the easiest way to get to those most people is Facebook and Instagram. So all of our marketing, Facebook, Instagram, we've started Google recently. That's been really good for us. But it's all direct to consumer type marketing and a direct to consumer sales approach. So the builders that we do sell to, very much, a lot of them are smaller builders that are shopping like a consumer. So they are building 1 to 2 custom homes a year and they're on social scrolling and they are the one decision maker. They don't have a team, a purchasing staff, that sort of thing. And so these guys will see our product and be like, that looks cool, could set my house apart from other builders. And so they're buying it like a consumer. So that's been our strategy. High lead flow in, kind of into an inside sales team. And again, education, support, answering questions, very responsive. And like, again, a D2C approach where you understand that consumers are very different than personal or professionals. So they're emotional. You sell the dream, you sell, you know what I mean? Like you have to inspire
Yeah.
them. And so that's an approach that's worked well for us, but it's not traditional. Most people in our industry sell through a
Right.
dealer network, you know, like low price point, try and get into the market and then acquire repeat builders and volume accounts and stuff. So there's that arm of the business that we just haven't really touched. We have some repeat builders that have come in like a consumer and then stayed with us, but really like the B2B side of the business, we've just never built out. And that's something that probably in the next year or so we'll start, you know, strategizing and building a team around outside sales and like builder volume accounts. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. So when a homeowner comes to you, how like do most of them just pay for it, or is it they're like, hey, we're going to send this invoice to our bank, and there's like like there's a little more than just swiping the credit card to the
Yeah,
transaction?
I think so. Like there's it's interesting. Like you guys sell a tens of thousands of dollar product, right? And so
Hmm.
I think a lot of people at least I grew up with not very much money, and my family didn't have a lot. And so the thought of making a slightly impulse purchase on a $20,000 thing was just it didn't register, right?
Right.
If I like a new vehicle, I'm like, I'll think about it and I'll research and stuff. It's interesting. About 50% of our customers are probably reactionary. They have disposable income, right? And so it
Mm.
is a reactionary. And so we'll have people that are like, they'll call us and say, hey, I saw your videos. I love it. I'm building a new house. It's what I want. Can I give you my credit card right now? And it's like,
Hmm.
yes, you can. So
We will
there
allow
are
that. Yeah.
those for sure. But then there's the other side, which is a lot of customers will take it to the builder and say, I want this in my house. And the builder will actually say, I don't know who this is. I've never worked with them. There's some risk there for the builder. And so they'll kind of talk the client into a different product. So you have to build rapport with the builders and build a
Yeah. Yeah.
reputation and get your brand known. And we've done that. We've worked hard on that, but that just takes time. Like when
Yeah.
people are like, how long have you been around? And you're like, 2 years. And they're like, maybe we'll wait.
Yeah.
That's just, hey, build your reputation. That takes time
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
you'll
I
get
mean,
there. But
I think that's like if you can make it through the first 5 years, I think that's where your stability really sets in because you just, I know for us, our product is very simple and it's like, I think if you're a welder, you're like, oh yeah, I'll build that and make some extra money. And oh, they're charging outlandish, fees or whatever. And what you start to realize um, is like people consistency is so like they're just like we know that they're gonna do what they say and it's gonna show up, and you have to cut your teeth at that. But also understanding, yeah, the customer service component, but also marketing. Like if someone never sees you, like who's this fly by night guy? But if you're constantly in front of them, I feel like there is some sort of rapport being built. And then obviously the best is the neighbors have one, said it was a great experience. Like that's going to be your best. But
yeah.
there is something if you can get through those first years, I feel like you have a huge advantage because I mean,
Yeah, and I
people know who
think
you are.
it's this it's the same thing as like shrinking your product offering. I think in the beginning we were like, we'll sell in California, we'll sell in
Yeah.
Arizona, Georgia, right? And now it's like we've condensed our marketing and sales efforts into Texas, and it's like, hey, this is where we're at. We're in your backyard. We're like, and so yeah, the rate of people seeing us and hearing about us is higher if you're a little bit more concentrated with geographically where
Right.
you're offering. So I think there's a lot to that as well of being like, yeah, it's, uh, I see ads all the time that will pop up on my feed and I'm like, nope, nope, nope. And then like 6 months later, I'm like, I need a pair of shoes. And I remember seeing that cool pair. And
Hmm.
so it's just that, how do you not annoy them, but be in front of them enough that it's like, when and if a similar decision
Yeah.
comes up, or a friend is talking about it, right? Like, hey, I'm building a new house. Oh, have you seen that cool door? Have you seen that cool countertop? Whatever.
I had Bruce Clausen on earlier, and he builds like a lot of our product came from their ideology and how they build and whatever. And he was just telling me, he's like, with the marketing component, like before it was like, I just wanted sales, get me some sales, whatever the marketing is. He's like, now we'll quote someone a barn. And if they don't buy this year, it's fine. And I think there's something people feel that, right? Where you're just trying to help them understand what the budget is, what you're offering. And when you make, I know even in sales, when I was the one selling, I knew too much about the business to be selling almost. Like I'd be like, well, we can probably do this again, like opening up all these terrible things for the shop to deal with and
Yeah,
maybe giving discounts that weren't warranted, and then when you just, yeah, you get it like structured, for one, the customer feels more comfortable. Like they're like, oh man, it's not feeling like we're just chaos. We can just do whatever we want. And that's been huge for us. Like when you talk about keeping things more simple, one of the things that I noticed is like the customer shouldn't have to do your job. You should be able to evaluate your product into what the customer needs and wants, and it's an easy decision. And that was something I never understood. I thought I was helping the customer by essentially not doing my job in like product design and whatever. It's like, whatever you want, we'll do. And they're just like paralysis by analysis. And I think like it just changes stress levels for the customer and you when it's just like, here, just click on that and that's what you get.
I yeah, I think like you talked about, someone building these on the side, whatever. It's like if you're going to be around for 20 years in this business, like those guys aren't going to affect you at all, like in the grand scheme of
No.
things. Like if they steal one or two jobs from you, like, okay. Um, but I think the clearer that you get with your offering, like what we do, what we don't do, what we're great at, what we don't do, like not great at, and the quicker that you can convey that, it's actually like a lot of people will call us and say, "Hey, I want a door like this. Send us plans." And I'll look at it and be like, "Our the way our door operates just doesn't fit. Like you're better off going with this type of product." And they're like, "Oh, thank you." And instead of like trying to sell them on something or trying to configure our product to fit their needs, like it doesn't. It's never a win for either party. And
Mm-hmm.
so to me, is
Yep.
like the quicker that you can kind of say, "Hey, we're not a good fit," or "Hey, we're a really good fit,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
this is why." Like it's good for both parties. And when you
Yeah.
start to understand that saying no to some business is actually the best thing you can do, um, it's actually, yeah. But it's hard to do
We've,
when you're just like, I need to make payroll next week.
yes. Yeah.
So I'll
I
take
think
anything.
that not eliminating customers, but like um, there's something to be really said for that because you end up with customers that it wasn't a fit and just so much effort and warranty work or whatever. And you have a customer that's like 10 times as good and you have two interactions with them. And it was like,
Yep.
can we get more of those, please? And you do start refining it. We still like, we have one right now that we're dealing with that we're like, man, I wish we'd told them to go and, you know, that someone
Yep.
else would have been a better fit, but like hopefully it's not a complete disaster. At the same time, we've learned a lot with it, but you still get the odd one, I think, but it sure is
Oh,
nice
yeah.
eliminating that for the most part.
Yeah.
So one last
Agreed.
question for you, Adam.
Yep.
Someone had mentioned to me like it would be really good to do podcasts around a topic of like something you're dealing with currently. So something that I've been dealing with for the last few years, but is becoming like more apparent that I have to deal with it in a certain way. Um, is like 1099 contractors. Obviously, like we have our suppliers, they are businesses that are bigger than ours or equivalent to ours, and they have their own business plan model. If we were to disappear, they would go and find more business to replace ours or whatever. But then we have like some direct 1099 subcontractors that there's ones that we use on occasion that they can replace. They're like call us when you need us type of thing. But then we have some that are like the entirety of their income is coming from you. They're independent in the fact they own their own equipment, but it's kind of that weird like you're not a direct employee, you're not on payroll on salary, and you're not privy to all the meetings and whatever. Like we still try to forecast for them or whatever, starting to, but they almost like act as if a salaried person would act like, oh, I guess I got no work this week. And it's like, oh, we broke down like in the shop. So like, sorry, like you're paid piecework. And so it's kind of an interesting thing, like as far as company loyalty, it's like, are they loyal? Are they not? And it gets to be kind of, I've dealt with it just kind of like this awkward relationship where it's like, I'm a sole proprietor and I'm my own person. Oh, you don't have any work for me? And it's like, well, weren't you just saying that you're like really independent, growing your own business? And so I'm curious what if you have any experience with that, if how Glass Expanse looks at 1099s and service providers. And anyway, you have anything you can share
Yeah.
experience with
Yeah.
that?
Like we went through a phase where we did a bunch of 1099 because it was exactly that. People were like, "Oh, I want to own my own business and have flexibility with my time and all of that." And you're like, "Cool, that's awesome." But like you're not an employee. And so We did that and we had a lot of pain, like you explained. And so um, I would say in 22 was when we kind of chopped all of that and said, listen, either you come in and you're an employee and you know what you're getting and you have clear expectations. Cause like for us, it was, you can't set you can't hold them accountable at the end of the day, right? Like you can, but they're their own entity. Whereas as an employee, you have like a little bit more control over like holding them accountable. And so I think in 2022 was when we just kind of said, we're not doing 1099. Like we're just not. And so everything that we have is either like, as if it's a, like our logistics company is like, we don't hire individual 1099 employees or like people to deliver our product or anything like that. It's all done through a big brokerage. Our the people that install our product now, we basically refer their name out and it's like they can have a separate contract with the builder, the homeowner. So like
Yeah.
we've just cleaned it up completely and it's like the shipping of our product, logistics, getting it to site, we handle and it's through one firm and they handle everything and they've been great to us. But like we don't handle anything on like a onesie twosie type of 1099 basis anymore just because we had so much pain with it. And honestly, like if you can find someone as a 1099 that does a good job, usually you can find an employee that will do a good job or a separate company, like an independent company that is like, provides a service for you. So we've just kind of said, no, we're not doing any more of that. And that's been
So
really good.
you used to do your own delivery and install, but you don't anymore.
Correct. Yes. So
And that's been good.
that was going to be the second thing I said about like refining product offering. We tried to build a service component to a manufacturing company and be both. And building product and getting it ready to ship is again controlled environment. And then you tack on this business, and this was losing money hand over fist, super inefficient, tons of turnover, hard to scale. And this thing was just like, hey, when are you gonna like give us opportunity to grow a bit more? Like this thing was holding us back.
Yeah.
In 23, beginning of 23, we stopped offering. And the same thing, like, oh, no one's going to order from us because we don't do install anymore. Like sales team was like, the world is ending. And sales just went all the way through, like no hiccup at all.
Interesting.
And so you have
Was it
your
hard to
existing
find
clients.
like was it hard to find contractors that could install that you trusted that you would refer to customers? That was easy.
No, the funny thing is that the people that we were hiring, and like I loved our installers, but we were basically taking very inexperienced people because we couldn't afford to pay a carpenter to hire full time and drive 500 miles each way and spend 8 hours in a vehicle at $30 an hour. So we were hiring $20 an hour employees with limited
Oh, yeah, yeah.
experience. And so you're training them and they're trained to do your product, but they're not like a good construction expert. And so
Yeah.
you have this like high turnover, not great problem solving according to construction kind of. And so it was just this like um, unscalable, always problems. Like all our vehicles were always like, oh, whoops, I backed into a building with your $80,000 van. Oh, whoops, I dropped a panel, which I like. And so in order for us to get the experience to where we wanted, it's like you would have had to pay a
Yeah.
lot. And
And most of
again,
their time is
so
driving probably because if they
yes,
home base, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Crazy.
So it was just really inefficient. And then, so the quality of the installs, like these guys were trained on our product, but they weren't like true craftsman carpenter types.
Hmm.
And so what you find is there's a lot of guys that are those types of people that have one or two guys and they just do door installs and they do every product and they're just nerds about it. And the
Hmm.
quality of their install is actually better. And so what we're
Yeah.
getting is a better quality install, what we feel like. And it's at a cost point to the customer, depending, there's levels. Some guys charge you $5,000 to install a door and some are two, and you get a quality difference and you get to choose. Like,
Yeah.
um, so that's been a huge benefit as far as stress and
Nice.
liability and all that.
Totally. So simplifying the business really. And I think that's where like I read some historical fiction novels. That's part of my stress management. But it's interesting like when we started trusting other people to do their job and like specializing and working together, like the world does become a better like for sure economically you become better. I don't know about everything else, but like when you have these great partnerships, whether it's suppliers or like, yeah, material suppliers or service providers that you can refer people to or whatever, they like, it's amazing how your business gets better, but they also are like profitable and like, doing well. It's
Yeah.
just amazing to me. I know for ourselves, like we're at a point where sometimes we wonder about doing our own delivery and install. I mean, it's hardly install, but our delivery drivers, like maybe just like sometimes they're different enough from us that we like get annoyed or whatever, but we could never have scaled the way we did if I was driving around the countryside delivering our product.
Yeah.
And it's very specialized, but they do such an amazing job. It allowed us to, like exactly what you said, focus solely on sales and production. And it was a win-win. And like people would be like, you pay them what? Like they're very well paid. Of course, they do have some risk if we don't provide them sales, like, you know, because we have some that like work solely for us, but they can go and get other work. Like they're not totally handicapped, but it definitely is one of those things where the only reason we would bring it on board is like people are like, oh, you pay him all that money. It would actually probably cost more to do it ourselves. The only reason we do it ourselves is to control it. Like it wouldn't
Yeah.
actually be a financial decision. It would be like, we just want like staff on board. It would be more of a headache. You got DOT, you've got like all these different
Yeah.
things. Truck breaks down 400 miles away and you got to deal with it. They deal with it now. So it's like definitely not, uh, I guess what I'm getting at is you can deceive yourself that you're going to like earn more money or save money by not using someone that's a professional in what they do. And you're just totally limiting yourself on the other end. It
I
just
think, yeah,
crushes
and
you.
I think what you're pointing to is like, and what I've struggled with for a long time is as a small business, how you allocate your capital is so important. And I think most people underestimate how important that is and do a very poor job of it. And so, I mean, there's some people that
Yes.
just take a bunch of cash out of the business and they're like, I'm pulling the cash out.
Yes.
That's fine. But like inside the business, as far as expenses, like I think what you're talking about is like, yes, I have the money to go buy a truck and hire somebody and whatever. But like the net gain of that versus putting that into marketing and sales is totally different. And
Yeah.
so sometimes I think as an owner, there's always opportunity at the small business. Like I could do this and I could do that. And so really understanding like what are the outcomes and where can I apply capital and assets, whatever, right? People,
Yeah.
time, but like what is the return I'm going to get? And like we were like, man, we could like do a better delivery service and like white glove service kind of, and maybe even cheaper. And then it's like, okay, it would take X amount of dollars, like tens of thousands, hundred thousands of dollars to put that in place. And like, what does that do if we just dump that into marketing and sales? Like, that's
Yeah.
a totally different game. So to me, it's like sometimes we want to do things, but we don't understand what the outcome is. And so I think people
100%.
need to understand and like be better at like strategic thinking around capital.
Yeah, I I couldn't agree more. And you can do that on a really small scale with like a really simple tool to like maybe a more major purchase. Like, oh, I think always like there's a good awareness. I'm going to save on this. I think the moment you start saying that, you should take a really hard look because there's a
Yeah.
likelihood that we have figured, we've been driving vehicles, like in our instance, we've been driving vehicles and trucks for a long time. And the thought that you can go and just never doing it before, buy a unit, hire a guy, and somehow be making more money, I think is like, it's one of those, I think it's a dangerous trap to get into. Someone said to
And
me,
it's
like,
missed.
don't take another man's job type of thing. Like, And I think there's something to that. Like, don't go thinking you're
Yeah.
going to take someone else's job.
I think too, it's like missed opportunity is probably the biggest waster for, because like your talent and your skill and your time is like worth a lot more than you think. Most owners
Yes.
don't like, are like, oh, I'm worth
Yeah.
$400 an hour. It's like, no, you're not. And so
Right.
I think a lot of times it's lost opportunity. Like, yeah, you're not only are you putting money in there, but like you're going to spend time and working through all the problems, and you're going to hold the hand of the first guy, and you're going to drive it everywhere. And like, what are you missing out on? And so
Hmm.
that's the other side too, is like, you got to be aware that, it's not only just money in, money out, it's time, it's stress, it's all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So
Well, we might have to do another one of these about just like
yeah,
the
so
manufacturing processes, but I think we've spent enough time here. I
yeah,
think you and I could talk forever about this sort of
yeah.
thing.
We should just record a
I
weekly like jam session. It'd be good. It'd be fun just to catch up, because I'm terrible at like actually reaching out and be like, hey, let's jump on a call. This is a little bit more personable too. So it's like,
Right. Yeah.
sometimes if I'm talking on the phone with the kids running around, it's like it's hard to concentrate. But
Something I
this
like
was awesome.
about the podcast is that I am a very dominant personality. And I never knew this up until like 3 years ago. But I put a lot of pressure on myself unknowingly, like subconsciously, to like fill the air, and that people are like depending on me to keep the conversation going, or people are depending on me for income, or they're depending. And it's just a personality. It's not like to the point of disorder, I don't think. But something like with a podcast that's been super helpful for me is teaching me to be a better listener, because you don't want to be the person that has a podcast and just like every time someone says something have some sort of rebuttal, or like, and so I think there's something about it, like even for talking with you, I get so excited because we're always seemingly at very similar happenings and stages in our business. So it's like, oh, that's happening for you, and then you like got to get out what's happening for you so you can get feedback, and it like kind of takes that pressure away, or it's like I'm just gonna sit and listen, and
Yeah.
that's been really cool.